Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're heading to Ecuador, where there's been a pretty dramatic declaration of maximum alert.
That's right.
And our mission is really to understand what's going on, especially with these claims of an assassination plot against the re-elected President Daniel Noboa.
It's a complex situation.
Yeah, definitely. We're using an Al Jazeera report from April 19th, 2025 as our main source to help us kind of unpack the key details. Okay, let's dive in.
Well, what's immediately striking, I think, is the context here. Ecuador has been grappling with some really serious security problems lately, so this news doesn't exactly come out of the blue.
Not at all. It's building on existing tensions, isn't it?
Precisely. It's unfolding against a backdrop of already heightened tensions and quite a bit of violence.
Absolutely. So the Al Jazeera report kicks off with the Ecuadorian government's statement, and the title they used, wow, The Revenge of the Bad Losers. That's pretty loaded. Apparently, this maximum alert means all security protocols are now fully activated.
Right.
And the threat, they say, comes from, and I'm quoting here, criminal organizations in collusion with political groups defeated at the polls. It definitely sets a dramatic tone from the start.
It really does. And that title, The Revenge of the Bad Losers, it's quite telling, isn't it?
Yeah, it immediately frames it.
Exactly. By framing the threat that way, the government is, immediately suggesting a political source, not just random criminal activity. It's a very deliberate shaping of the narrative.
Right. And it's important to remember, like the report points out, President Noboa was just reelected.
Fresh off the election.
Yeah. And his whole campaign really focused on continuing this major crackdown on cartel violence, which has just become this huge, huge problem in Ecuador.
Central promise.
But it wasn't exactly a clean win in everyone's eyes, was it? His opponent, Luis Gonzalez, is actually still alleging the election was fraudulent. How significant is that claim in this whole situation right now?
Oh, it's really important. That claim of fraud. If a significant part of the opposition, or even just the public, believes the election wasn't legitimate, well, that can seriously undermine the president's authority.
Makes sense.
And it creates an environment where political tensions are just much more likely to boil over. It could potentially fuel unrest or maybe even provide a sort of pretext for actions like this alleged plot.
Okay, now here's a detail that really jumped out at me from the Al Jazeera article, this maximum alert declaration. It came after a military intelligence report was leaked earlier in the week.
The leak, yes.
And this report apparently indicated that assassins were actually entering Ecuador, coming from Mexico and other countries, with plans for terrorist attacks, specifically targeting President Noboa. So this isn't just like a vague feeling. There seems to be some intelligence behind it.
It's not just rhetoric.
What does it tell us that this information was leaked, though?
Well, the leak itself is interesting. It could suggest a few things. Maybe internal divisions within the security forces, or perhaps it was a deliberate move to publicize the threat.
Yeah.
Maybe to rally support for the government's actions.
Or something else entirely.
Or something else. And, the mention of people coming from Mexico immediately brings to mind the significant influence that Mexican drug cartels unfortunately have in the region. That's a known factor.
Yeah, the government statement really hammers that point home. It alleges that these bad losers from the April 13th election actually hired sicarios. Hitmen, yeah, from Mexico and other countries, specifically to destabilize the government. It's a direct accusation.
That's correct.
And their intelligence sources reportedly pointed to plots involving not just the assassination, but also terrorist attacks and even like orchestrated street riots through violent demonstrations.
Wow.
It sounds incredibly coordinated, at least according to the government's version.
Yes, and by detailing this kind of multi-pronged threat, you've got assassination, terrorism, social unrest. The government is painting a picture of a really serious, widespread conspiracy.
Aimed at the whole state, not just Noboa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Aimed at undermining the entire state apparatus.
Now, the statement itself doesn't name names, does it? But Al Jazeera points out it implicitly fingers the Citizen Revolution Movement, or RC5.
RC5.
Which is led by Luis Gonzalez, the opponent we mentioned, and has strong ties to the former president, Rafael Correa. For listeners who might not be familiar, can you just briefly explain who the Citizen Revolution Movement is and why accusing them, even implicitly, is such a big deal?
Sure. The Citizen Revolution Movement, RC5, is a major political force in Ecuador. It represents a large chunk of the left-leaning political base and is very closely associated with the policies and legacy of former President Correa.
Okay.
So accusing them, even implicitly, of orchestrating something like this, that's a huge move. It has potentially massive political consequences, and it just deepens the already significant polarization in the country.
It basically frames your main political opposition as a direct threat to national security.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
A threat to the state itself.
Okay, so this is where it takes an international turn, too. The Al Jazeera report mentions that some media outlets in Ecuador have even suggested potential support from foreign leaders.
Right, adding another layer.
Specifically naming the Mexican president Claudia Sheinbaum. And this seems to connect with the fact that Mexico already said they won't restore diplomatic relations with Ecuador as long as Noboa is president.
That diplomatic spat.
And Sheinbaum had also publicly supported Gonzalez during the election. So there's clearly some bad blood, some diplomatic fallout already happening here.
Definitely.
What could be the reasons behind Mexico's strong stance, do you think?
Well, it's probably a mix of things.
Yeah.
Publicly backing a candidate is, fairly standard diplomacy sometimes. But the refusal to restore relations, that likely points to deeper political or maybe ideological disagreements with the Noboa administration.
Goes beyond just election support.
Yeah, maybe stemming from events over the past year, as the report kind of hints at. And look, the suggestion of involvement from foreign leaders, even if it's just in media reports for now,
Just suggestions, yeah.
it adds a very complex and potentially destabilizing international element to the whole situation. It really raises the stakes.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to keep emphasizing these are allegations and media suggestions at this point. But zooming out again, all of this is playing out against this backdrop of just terrible escalating violence in Ecuador.
It's inescapable.
The report reminds us of that horrific assassination of the presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio back in 2023. What did that event really signal about where Ecuador was heading?
Oh, Villavicencio's assassination was just shocking. It brutally highlighted the reality of organized crime and its power, its reach within Ecuador.
Yeah.
It showed a level of impunity, a boldness from these criminal groups that was deeply, deeply concerning. And it really underscored the vulnerability, didn't it? Even for high-profile political figures.
Absolutely. And it's not just these big, high-profile cases, unfortunately. The article points to, pervasive violence from gangs involved in drug trafficking, particularly spilling over from Peru and Colombia nearby.
The regional connection is key.
And they give this really chilling example. A recent attack in Manabí province. At least 12 people killed by gunmen dressed in fake military uniforms who attacked people watching a cockfight.
Just horrific.
That detail about the fake uniforms, what does that suggest to you?
Well, using fake military uniforms is particularly disturbing, isn't it? It suggests a certain level of sophistication, maybe even potential infiltration of state security structures.
Wow.
And definitely an intent to sow more chaos, more distrust by blurring the lines between who the legitimate forces and the criminals.
Yeah, it makes it hard to know who to trust.
It really underscores the massive challenge the government faces in just trying to reestablish basic control. And President Noboa declaring that internal armed conflict last year that shows the government recognizes how severe this threat from the drug gangs really is.
Right. And, as the report notes, Noboa's tough stance on these gangs, plus his promises on the economy, those were likely key reasons he got reelected.
People want solutions.
Exactly. People are clearly desperate for some kind of solution to this violence. But then, circling back, you have Luisa Gonzalez, his opponent. Despite the official results, she's claiming grotesque fraud and planning to contest them.
Still challenging the legitimacy.
So the very foundation of his mandate is being questioned by a major political force. How does that challenge potentially feed into this current crisis?
Well, it just creates this situation where the government's legitimacy is already kind of under a cloud for a big part of the population, right?
Yeah.
And that can make it harder for the government to govern effectively, obviously. But it also might make claims of politically motivated plots, like this assassination one, seem more believable to people who already doubt the election outcome.
So it becomes a cycle.
Exactly. It's a cycle where distrust can just easily breed more instability.
Okay, so let's just quickly summarize what we've sort of unpacked here based on that Al Jazeera report. Ecuador is on maximum alert. The government claims there's an assassination plot against President Noboa. They're pointing fingers at the, quote, bad losers from the election.
The political rivals.
Citing these leaked intelligence reports about foreign hitmen, potentially linking it to the main opposition party, RC5. And all of this is happening amid this ongoing crisis of horrific drug violence and, importantly, those disputed election results.
It's a perfect storm, really. And what makes this situation so volatile, I think, is how interconnected all these different elements are.
Yeah.
The assassination plot allegations, they could be a genuine, terrifying threat.
Yeah.
Or they could be a politically charged maneuver in this already deeply divided and violent context. It's just a very, very complex picture right now. Lots of uncertainty.
It really is. And this leads us to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to really consider. Given Ecuador's history, the political instability we've seen before and the current environment, this intense polarization, the criminal violence, what specific factors do you think we should all be watching for in the coming weeks and months? What might help confirm these allegations or perhaps suggest they were unfounded or politically motivated? It's clearly a developing story with potentially huge consequences for Ecuador's future and its fight against organized crime. Thanks for diving deep with us today.